Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. Core Recruitment, as you might be aware, is an international recruitment company, and we specialize in mid to senior level appointments for exec and non-exec opportunities. Now we're running this interview series globally to inspire a bit of positivity and a bit of innovation kind of like across the sectors that we recruit within. And we're really lucky to be speaking to lots of different industry leaders from lots of different subsectors of business and finding out a little bit more about them and the businesses that they operate. So there's lots of articles and videos that are listed on our website, www.corerecruitment.com, if you want to have a little bit of a look at them and look and share and all of that kind of side of things as well. Now, I'm really excited to have John Davies joining us today, and I've known John for, I think it's going on 20 years. I think he's the same age as me, and I'm still working as a recruitment consultant, and he's running a massive global business. My one claim to fame is that I've actually managed to place him twice before, and one of them was his first ever director position within his career, and that really impresses anyone at Compass Group that I speak to at dinner parties, because you're kind of the main man there now, John, aren't you? You pull all the strings, right?
I'm not the main man, no. No, I run Levy. I don't claim to run Compass. I never have, Christian, to be fair.
I just did the main man, you know what I mean? It's behind the scenes. It's what I'm going for. So basically, with Compass Group, lots of people obviously within the service sector know who Compass are. It's kind of, but I still think that the wider general public might not be aware of just how large the organization is. And Levy, by comparison, I mean, in terms of the scales of your operations and what you actually deliver, is absolutely massive. Just to get us kicked off, can you give us a bit of an idea of the scale of the business that you're responsible for?
Of course, yeah, no problem at all. So, like you say, we are part of Compass Group, but Levy operates as its own company within a company, if you like, and we're focused pretty clearly on three major market sectors. So we run stadiums, we run conference centers or large scale convention centers, and we run arenas. And by stadia, I also include racecourses, horse racing, and essentially within those three markets, we focus on hospitality, general admission, public catering, and conference and events that happen. And that's the focus of the company. We've grown quite a lot over the last. I've been here 10 years. I've been running the business since 2018, and we've gone from say around circa 300 million turnover to this year we're going to push 700 million. So good growth, and we've grown the bottom line as well. Some good clients that have been grown with us and transformed. We've diversified the business, different service lines, both geographically as well. So there's a good positivity around Levy and what we achieve.
Excellent. And just to get a bit of an idea, like, Twickenham on a match day, Twickenham's the
Yeah.
biggest one, right? Like, I mean, what do you deliver at Twickenham kind of like on a big day?
Yeah, look, Twickenham's one of our biggest, definitely. It's something like a Six Nations match, which we're coming up to at the moment, where you've got 80 plus thousand people in the stadium. You're talking about over 10,000 hospitality covers across multiple levels. It's got box level, but you've got all the different lounges and suites in the different stands. The East Stand, which got renovated pre-COVID, basically doubled the size of the hospitality spaces. We'll have well over 3,000 staff in to deliver the services, and that's including all of the outside spaces as well. We work with third party contractors, with mobile caterers out in the West car park, which turns into a bit of a party zone pre-game. If England have won, the party carries on afterwards. It really is a very large scale operation. But the thing I'm proud about at Twickenham is the culinary team there is genuinely really, really excellent. It started off with the leadership of Tom Rhodes. Now Sean's taken on the mantle as exec chef there. Tom stepped up into the organisation, and we've got really good, from the sustainability to the freshness of the product to the storytelling on the menus. It really is, I think, one of our very best.
Absolutely. Now, Levy as a concept in a business, it came from the States, didn't it?
Mhm.
Kind of like initially, and I seem to remember kind of like all this buzz about it coming over, but you guys have really revolutionized kind of like, because it's not pies and pints kind of like at half time and all of that kind of stuff anymore. You've really revolutionized the whole kind of like catering experience for customers, haven't you?
Well, we still do pies and pints. We haven't it's not been that big a revolution. We definitely can't move away from that. But look, yeah, you're right. Look, Levy started in 1978 in Chicago. Two brothers opened a cafe deli. One of their famous customers was the owner of the Chicago White Sox, who brought them in, loved their dessert trolley, brought the dessert trolley into the Chicago White Sox, and baseball corporate hospitality was born. The boys then grew the business very rapidly in Chicago, New York, California, and all the way down into Florida. And that got the attention of Compass. Compass bought them in 2005. We brought the brand over to the UK in 2007 when the O2 opened, Millennium Dome into the O2. And that was the first Levy contract that was in the UK. And then over a period of time, we've just taken what the great foundations that are in the US and the foundations of that business. And Andy Lansing still runs that business in North America, and he goes back to I think 1984 with the Levy business. So huge provenance with the brand and an understanding of that. And then we've just refined it for the British market. So yes, if we still do pies and pints, but to your point, we look at the quality of what's in the pie, the sourcing of it, the sourcing of the flour that goes in the pie. Some of our venues like Tottenham Hotspur, we make all of the pies and sausage rolls on site at Tottenham Hotspur. We really care about the product and the provenance that goes behind it. And on the pint side, it's very much how do you get that pint as quickly as possible into someone's hand before kickoff or at half time. And then the evolution of the hospitality model and what goes on into the tiering of that hospitality, because it's not when I first joined the industry, it very much was you've either got three courses on a white tablecloth, table of 10, table of 12, or you've got carvery. That were pretty much the two options in football or rugby hospitality. And we've got this whole plethora of tiering now from what we call GA plus, the entry levels hospitality, which is much more casual or bowl food or just a really nice bar the way you can chill out with your mates before the game, all the way through to the VVIP level, which is still almost Michelin star quality, and then all the levels in between. And premium informality has been the biggest change in what I've seen in my career, that we've switched away from that formality of dining before a match, turning up in a suit and jacket and a tie and eating a three-course meal and then falling asleep in the game. That really
Yeah.
has been a massive switch and change, which has been influenced by trends from American sports. It's about the experience as well as the food.
Absolutely. Now, John, we've known each other for a long time, and one thing which has always been really apparent is that you've got a very ethical approach to business and how and operations and all of that side of things as well. I actually do remember you saying to me at one stage, kind of like, must have been kind of 20 years ago, I never went to work for a big corporate company. I always went to work for the small guy and all of that kind of side of things as well. And I mean, you couldn't be working for a bigger company now, although it's a smaller division kind of like within that.
Yeah.
How would you say your leadership style and that kind of approach has changed over the years?
Well, look, it's a really good point because yeah, that would have been my opinion in my 20s, and then I ended up working for quite small companies, boutique companies, where when you're pushing a sustainable message to clients, you're pushing an open door, but because you're in a company that's maybe turning over 10 or 20 million, you really are a drop in the ocean. And I'm about change and how do I try through the scale of what we're doing, echo that change in the industry and to have a big ripple effect. The reason I joined Compass was because they are the world's biggest contract caterer. And if we are going to try and change things like food systems and how we treat farmers and how we treat the people that work for us, not just in terms of pay, but benefits and career opportunities, what better opportunity than trying to change the biggest in the market? And if, my view has always been if we can change that, the direction of that ocean liner a couple of degrees every year,
Mm,
it does have a much bigger impact. And now, look, I'm not claiming I've changed Compass. I haven't, but I have helped change Levy and the positioning of Levy in the UK, Ireland, and now in Europe. I think we have a very clear position on where we stand around how we treat our people and where we treat the planet, and I'm very proud of that. And I think it has had a ripple effect of people understanding when they come to work for Levy what our core values are.
absolutely. Now, you very recently have launched some new sustainability initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Love to. Depends on how much time you've got, Christian. But yeah, there's literally this week we've launched a Living Systems Fund, which is us putting our money where our mouth is. We're supporting 6 projects across the UK. This ranges from a seagrass project to create new marine habitats, community gardens schemes up in Cumbria, and also one in Greenwich, Sitopia, which is a very well-known scheme. Looking at watercourse management in one of the farms we work with in Shropshire. Looking at how we create a new woodland scheme in an estate in the Highlands of Scotland, where we're working on replanting and creating shade for salmon runs up there. An insect project in the North Yorkshire moors to create biodiversity, and we're just helping to fund those projects as part of our ambition to change some of the challenges we're facing, because there is fundamental issue with the food system. We are in a position of power, if you like, that we can talk directly to producers and suppliers and projects like the ones I've just described to try and be more positive and activate change rather than just talk about it. Actually go out there and do these things. For many years we talked about doing carbon credits, and I think
Mm.
luckily we didn't put our head above the parapet with that, because I think that's starting to look like a busted flush, frankly, and a lot of bad schemes out there. And we didn't trust ourselves to go into that market to get the value. Whereas actually putting our cash into real projects that we can see the real benefit, that excites me. And it links, that the Highland project with the new woodland areas. From that same estate, we're also sourcing wild venison, and that's a separate project and a separate campaign that we've launched. Wild venison are, they're an ecological menace in the Highland, well, everywhere, frankly, but certainly in the Highlands of Scotland. They eat and graze like goats. So the reason why a lot of areas in the Highlands look barren isn't, this natural stark beauty that people talk about. It's actually because you've got 1.5 million wild deer effectively in the Highlands of Scotland.
Really?
Yeah, eating and grazing every green shoot that comes out. So every sapling of a tree or a bush is getting decimated. You can see pictures of woodland areas that have been protected from wild deers and ones that haven't, and it's unbelievable the difference. And then the impact on the biodiversity and the further impact on other living organisms that would naturally be in that space is devastating. There's no natural predators of wild venison. Historically, it would have been wolves and lynx in
Mm.
Scotland. Obviously, many hundreds of years since either of those have been around. And during COVID, obviously, the population boomed because no one was shooting them at all effectively. So they do multiply very quickly. There's also a massive health benefit. These animals are lean, full of omega-3, and eat a naturally wild diet. Can you think of any other animal that we eat in the UK that hasn't got human inputs, hasn't got
Mm.
some element of a human input, whether it's overfeeding, overwintering, the feed that goes into the pasture animals? They're still eating a soy-based diet, usually over winter. These animals are choosing what they eat, when they eat, how they eat. So they've got naturally the nutrients that are within the meat itself are extremely, extremely positive for us as individuals to eat them. Everyone's obsessed with protein at the moment. Nutrition,
Mm.
you talk about that. Got more Wild venison's got more protein per kilo than any other red meat. It's got the leanest. So if you're going to the gym, this is the product that you should be eating. And it's a waste product a lot of the time. A lot of it's going into animal feed or dog food. So as the price of beef goes up, and the price of beef's gone up 25-30% in the last 2 years, price of venison way underneath that. So we're trying to educate both our chefs teams who are on board now and our customers and our clients that this is a great way of preserving the natural living systems of the UK, as well as putting a product on the plate that is fantastic.
Amazing. It's really interesting. I was not aware of that at all. Now, in terms of like the catering side of things is kind of one thing, but again, having worked with you guys for kind of like years, in terms of kind of like some of the other areas like the E15, the project management, all of these kind of like different parts, the partnership side that you look
Yeah.
after, can you just give us a bit of an idea of some of the stuff that you're doing, which is just outside of the normal catering sphere across Levy?
Yeah, look, 7 or 8 years ago, we'd have been just seen as the caterer, which is fine. We are a food company. We obviously will always be at our core. But as the evolution of our clients and the venues that we look after, they needed more support, and they needed a company that evolved with them. So we were finding actually we need to be stronger on data. and the analysis of data, whether it's through sales data on the public side, but also data in terms of ticketing, premium strategy to look at sales and hospitality. And then they'll say, okay, actually the data is telling us that we need to change one of the big hospitality lounges in one of the stadiums. Okay, well, do we then have to bring in a load of third parties to do that? And then that becomes expensive and we're not controlling the process. So we took some strategic investments in, well, we own half of a company called Benchmark, who do design and build. We also now own 2020, which is an amazing design agency. So we can then bring that talent into the conversation with our clients to say, actually, we can do a full turnkey through E15 Insights, which is led by Richard Cheeseman, internal to us. He's got a team of, I think, up to 20 people now working on data and intelligence to then feed into Rack Leaders' team, which is built, which will then bring in Benchmark or 2020 and other expertise to say, well, the data is telling us this, and we can then design and build this facility. And actually, we also have the sales capacity through Charlie Buck, who's my chief commercial officer, and the Keith Prowse team, that if you want us to, we can then sell that proposition to the customer as well. Now, not all clients will want all of those services, and they might just want us to be the caterer, which is also absolutely fine. But we can now, through broadening our service reach, be much more. Our vision is to be a strategic venue partner, not just a caterer. And I think we've achieved that with a lot of our partnerships.
So I think that the way that you've done that whole E15 thing in particular, because everybody's talking about technology, everybody's talking about customer data, everyone's talking about the analysis kind of side of things, and having that team, that 20 people, just looking at the data and the analytics work, can you give us a bit of insight as to what kind of analysis they come back with and how you've been using that in the business to improve service or improve profitability?
Yeah, look, I think the key thing, and look, E15 was another division that was born in the States that we went over and saw, and I met Sandeep, who was the original guy that ran it, and still is over in North America, and he's amazing. And what he taught me was actually don't try and take caterers and make them do data. You've got to recruit a different skill set. And they'd gone out and recruited people with MBAs in data analytics and data science, and just then deployed them into hospitality. And I think that was the turnkey moment. We go, oh, actually, we need to do this differently. So I went and I knew Richard Cheeseman from the industry, and his background is he was originally an investment banker, and he worked with the original team behind the Wembley Stadium to actually work on the financial modelling of Club Wembley, of how that could finance the whole build of the stadium. It was the first time it had been achieved in the UK. And Richard's got a huge bank of knowledge on the back of projects like that and many others he's done across Europe, to then bring that back into Levy and then create a team of data scientists underneath him that can do simple things, that they can take so we have all of our sales data on a daily basis now pulling through, as well as all of our staffing data. So we've got a new workforce management app, Ubeo, linked into our sales data, so we can then map the sales curve with our variable staffing curve and realize actually we need more people. When the transaction levels are at its peak, we need a few more heads, and on the shoulder periods we could tighten up some of these shift patterns. And actually we used to get that data maybe 3 or 4 days after the event, Christian, and obviously no bloody use in that. Now our general managers can see it live, at the event. They can see who's checked in, what areas or outlets they're working in, and what transactions are coming through. And actually the peak periods, in all of our venues we have peak periods, which are usually, if it's an arena, it's half an hour before the main act comes on stage. If it's a football game or cricket or any rugby, it's immediately before or in any breaks in the game. And we've got to be able to transact at the highest possible level in those short periods of time, or we won't make our money. So we use that data to then inform, okay, how many till points do we need? How many people do we need behind the till points? What's the ergonomics that we need to deliver? Because a lot of what we found is the bigger the list of products, the slower the service. And actually on those key transaction points, simplicity is really, really important. And that's come through from the data that then gives the operators a clear direction. So it's not taking the power away from the operators, it's giving them a really good toolbox to say, actually, now I understand that curve, I understand the demands, I can manage the facility a lot better. And that's just on general admission. In hospitality, different data, different systems to look at pricing and tiering, because we sell all the hospitality at Wimbledon, for example. So Richard and his team We'll look at the sales curve of where we're selling across the year. What are the key, which areas or which offers or which lounges aren't selling quite as well? Do we need to tweak the product or the pricing or the marketing? And all of that comes out on the data as well.
Absolutely. I have to say, like, my kids are at an age where they've been getting into football, and we've made a couple of Tottenham matches, and I've got to say that kind of like the speed of service and the quality of service and the variety of products that you guys actually kind of like have somewhere like that, it's absolutely phenomenal, like in terms of like how quickly that you turn that around. It's very impressive. Now, as you guys, I mean, it's not just UK, like Marks and Spencer's, isn't it's not just food. It's like, the global side of things is obviously calling for you guys. And now you're in Ireland, you're in the Netherlands, you're in Germany. I know you're looking at kind of like some other markets as well. But can you just tell us about how you've been managing that kind of like expansion, and also if there's any kind of cultural challenges or operational challenges that have been different across those markets?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we bought a company in Ireland probably 3.5 years ago called Fitz's Catering. We had one operation over there already, a Viva Stadium, so we could then create Levy Ireland. But what we were careful to do, and what we found has worked in other territories that we've gone into, we didn't come in and say, right, it's our way now, and we're gonna, you've got to be very respectful for the local culture and the local economy, and what works in Ireland will be slightly different to what works in the UK and slightly different to what works in the Netherlands and Germany. Everyone has slight differences, and you can't, never is that more true than the food on the plate. There will be regional differences and cultural differences of what people want to see and how it's served, how it's displayed, how it's sourced. So the Irish team that we took on, all four of the original directors and founders of that business are still with us 3.5 years on. I think that's critical. So many acquisitions go wrong where you buy the brand, get rid of the team that were running that brand for many years, and then wonder why it then declines over a series of years. And we've been very proud to see the growth of that business, and we're actually mobilizing a new piece of business in 2026 in Ireland, where we believe we've kept the culture and the integrity and the foundation, but we've just overlaid some of our best practices, processes in technology, and how we can bring, some of the very high quality resources we've got in the UK business to help support the Irish business. But it's still very much an Irish business, and that's exactly the same when we went to Amsterdam, when we opened the Johan Cruyff Arena. Yes, we brought people over from our, Lee Aldred, who you know very well as well. Lee's gone, he's based himself in Amsterdam for over 2 years, but we've built a Dutch team around him and to run the stadium, because it's very important, both from a language point of view and a cultural point of view, that we're not imposing a British way of doing it. It's just having those core principles that underneath what makes an operation Levy, our brand values, our integrity, our sourcing principles. They're non-negotiable. But then within the actual local economy, and exactly the same in Germany, what a German fan wants in Berlin is different to what they want in Hamburg, and it's very different to what they want in Amsterdam, and it's very different to what they want, say, in Burnley. And we have to be able to adapt, and not, there's not a cookie cutter approach, but there are just red lines of what it is to be a Levy operation around sustainability, how we treat our people, how we deploy our technology and our design principles, and how we talk and engage with our client partners.
Absolutely. And when looking at, because I think one of the big questions in your sector is what do you do with that space on non-match day, like,
Yeah.
events and all of that side of things as well. And, and it's a question that we always get that comes up when we're recruiting for these types of positions is somebody who can take a commercial approach to how they utilize the space and how they work with the venues to find solutions to this. Do you think the UK is further ahead? Do you think the other European, have you noticed any trends on that side of things?
Look, there is definitely a trend in Europe, and I'm not quite sure why it's developed in this way. They tend to break up the different service levels. So it would be quite normal on the continent to have one caterer doing VIP hospitality and a different caterer doing the public catering. And then in the middle, yeah, then maybe there's a bit of non-match day, but it's usually an afterthought and it isn't seen as a big revenue driver. I always think, having one, whether it's us or one of our competitors, I think it always makes more sense to have one company overseeing the whole stadium operation, because that means you can have a better management on site, better quality commercial operation, and then you can go after the opportunities. Because most of these venues, even if they're busy, even if they're in Europe, even if you've got two teams playing there, you're still only talking between 30 and 50 days a year that
Mm.
stadium will be in occupation. And in some of our venues, like Twickenham's a good example, that they may only have 12 major event days a year. So you have to be very commercial about, and they are, the team at Twickenham are a great example, where they do a lot of conferencing and a lot of events to fill in those gaps, because then you get consistency. So then you've got a core fixed team that are being, that can be busy every single day of the year, or at least every week of the year. Then you're getting consistency in operational delivery, consistency in culinary delivery, and that have just bring people in to do the peaks and troughs on major match day. It definitely falls over. So I think we are in the UK ahead in that sense, that we do have, single operations, look at the entire 365, abate availability and drive for a stadium to be that way. And our stadium partners are thinking like that as well. Tottenham's a good example. Yes, obviously it's home to Tottenham Hotspur football team, and that's the priority. But they also host two NFL games every October, which are massive events and massive revenue drivers, and the stadium is designed purposely for that. The concert series that we do over the summer
Mm.
months has just grown every single year. And then we have boxing and we have other sporting events like rugby coming there. It really has become a more of a multi-sport venue, or a multi-event venue, rather than just the home to Spurs. And I think more and more stadiums and events spaces are going to think like that in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we'd heard, and this is unconfirmed information, but like that when Beyonce played there recently, I think it was in the intermission, they took £1 million just in the intermission, kind of like when Beyonce was playing, which was like incredible. So that whole live music side of things really seems to be playing more. Have you noticed a big increase across the business from live music in terms of being a big trend?
Yeah, look, without a doubt, post-COVID, live music and wanting to be at the big live music events has definitely increased. I think people during COVID thought, it was one of the things people missed, and they realized you can't necessarily wait for these experiences. You have to take the opportunities while you can. What I think is interesting is the nature of the live events that are changing, because it can affect the food and beverage spend quite a lot. Because
Mm.
what's happened in the last couple of years is we've seen a rise of a younger crowd. Young female singer-songwriters are selling out, BST in Hyde Park, big stadiums, Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodriguez, Olivia Dean, people like that. You're getting absolutely rammed stadiums, but perhaps a lower spend than we'd get for, say, if the Rolling Stones were playing. The
Yes.
older the crowd, maybe the more male the crowd is, there is a more predominance of beer drinking, for example.
Mm.
And so we've had to alter our sales mix and what we're offering to those fans who aren't going to come in and drink 4 pints of beer. How do we then make sure that we're giving them what they want, and that we're altering our sales mix? And then you've got the K-pop phenomenon, which, is huge. Now traditionally the fans that come to those events spend very little. They spend a lot on merchandise. There's huge
Mm.
demand for merchandise. So then you have to alter your mix. But then we also have to be trying to say, well, how do we find a product, might be bubble tea instead of pints of beer, that we then have to alter to make sure that we can still drive that out. And I think that change in music is happening. That change and shift in consumer behavior is happening anyway. Younger people in general are drinking. That doesn't mean they're not drinking. I think there's a myth that everyone's teetotal. That's not true. People on the big nights out are still drinking, but they're being more selective in what they drink. They're probably prioritizing quality over quantity in a lot of examples, and they want the lifestyle experience, that Instagram moment, rather
Yeah.
than just, when it was 20 years ago. If you went to an Oasis gig, or people that went to Oasis gigs recently, it was more about how quickly you serve the most amount of lager. And that just
Yeah.
doesn't matter. That's not going to work in the majority. Beyonce is a good example. We'd have sold more premium wines and premium spirit mixers and cocktails than we'd have sold, traditional drinks.
Well, now, John, in terms of going into a little bit about your own leadership journey within kind of hospitality, because you studied politics at university. So, I mean, starting back at the start, like, what got you into hospitality catering kind of like initially?
Yeah, well, I mean, two things. One, I realized when I was studying politics that I didn't want to go into politics, and I thought the state of the world at the moment and what's going on the global stage says that's probably a very wise decision. I also ran out of money very quickly. I went to university and spent it like water, literally, and I had no other source of income, so I had to get a job, and I got a job in Cafe Rouge in York, back when Cafe Rouge was non-Whitbread. It was a genuine small chain run by Karen Jones, who
Yeah.
actually we're still associated with Karen because she's involved at the National Theatre where she's actually part of the client team there. So it's sort of come full circle. And I started off as a kitchen porter, doing, several shifts a week to earn cash. Then, as happens in catering, the commie chef left, so I got promoted by default because there was no one else to do it. And I had a really good head chef, a guy called Matt Dixon at the time, who took the time to teach me some basics, so I could do the commie chef role. And I was doing it by the time I left, probably 2.5 years later. I was, I wouldn't claim I was a professional chef, but I was a chef de partie level. I was running the kitchen on quite services, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the camaraderie, I enjoyed the buzz, I enjoyed a busy service. I enjoyed, we were in a basement with no windows, not unusual in catering, but it was good fun and it was decent money. I mean, hindsight actually was very poor. Poor. It was way before national minimum wage, so I think they got the pound of flesh out of me. And then you leave uni going, well, I don't want to do politics, but hospitality seems like quite fun. Sodexo at the time, or Gardner Merchant, were doing a graduate scheme, which was actually a very good graduate scheme. So I went into that, and essentially just the rest is history, I suppose. Just worked my way up, worked in different departments. I was in operations, done marketing, I've done strategic planning. I've worked for 5 different companies now. My time at Levy, 10 years, just over 10 years now, is the longest I've spent anywhere actually.
Excellent. And are there like through those five companies, through that kind of like career progression, you've worked for some phenomenal people. Like, is there anyone particular who's inspired you, or what kind of traits have you kind of picked up along the way?
Yeah, look, I still like the original people that I worked with very start at Sodexo. There were some great people that are still around in the industry, like Nigel Forbes is still around, and Nigel was one of my mentors, if you like, back in the day. He was very kind to me back then. There was lots of people that are still around. I worked for a lady called Christina back in Sodexo days as well. Who she was amazing and helped me on my career. But even on a small level, on the graduate scheme, I remember going to Cambridge University Press as a young junior guy, didn't know anything, and the general manager there, she was amazing and took time out, explained to me how to close the books, how to do stock take, how to manage the business, the P&L, the flash weekly returns. And she didn't need to do that. And she could have treated me, as a young upstart graduate. And she really took the time and care. And that it was people like that along the way, just small interventions that can have a big impact. And that I've taken, so I always try and take the time that if someone asks me a question or wants help or support or advice, always try and take that time and give them the focus, because even a small conversation can have a really big impact on someone's career, as it's had with mine.
Absolutely. Now, this interview series is meant to be erring on the positive and upbeat and innovation and all of that side of things, but we can't completely delude reality. And like, not every day is a sunny day in business. And there's a lot of companies, especially in the UK at the moment, I would say, that are kind of like struggling a little bit. So failure is a word which kind of like isn't normally an ugly word, but it's a word which comes up kind of like, reasonably often. And a lot of people will look at your career and working in Compass Group and there's all these big numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm sure not every day is a sunny day. Can you tell us about a couple of things that might go wrong every so often and what you've learned from them?
Yeah, look, I'm glass half full, Christian. You've got to be in this industry because you can find a dozen reasons why every morning is going to be a terrible morning. Do we get the support from government we should as an industry? Absolutely not. Are we getting, wrongly taxed business rates, NIC rates? Yeah, all of those, all of the above. And I think the government should value the hospitality industry a lot more than we do. We're the third largest employer in the UK. We add a huge amount of value and with the ability for social mobility
Hmm.
people can come into our industry with very little formal education, very little in the way of numeracy and literacy even, and get to very, very senior positions. So I still remain very positive about hospitality and the ambition that we can deliver. In terms of failures, look, we've all had them. If you're ambitious, you've got to take risks, number one. And if you take 10 risks, at least 3 or 4 of them are going to go wrong. And you've got to be comfortable with that. Look, as I back in 2006 to 2008, I worked for a very small company, and we built it up, and then we got kiboshed by the financial crisis in 2008, and went into the CVA receivership, and had to quickly change careers and quickly find a new job. I had a young family, still have a youngish family. My girls are teenagers now, but back then Molly was only 1 year old, and I had a mortgage to pay. So there was lots of things where you just have to back yourself and throw yourself at it, and find a new job, put your heart and soul into it, and work your way back up again from scratch. The only thing the thing that's maintained me from then to now is you've got to have a core belief system. You've got to have integrity. I always say this to everyone, there's the one thing you're born with and no one can take away is your integrity. And as long as you hold on to that until the day you die, you've done a good job, whatever you've done. As soon as you hand that away, you're absolutely screwed. You've got to maintain what you believe in, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. Have red lines around that. And if people challenge you on it, be prepared to walk away and have that strength of conviction. And that's what's carried me through.
Love that. In terms of like the negativity that is out there about the hospitality sector, I think this has kind of like quite a big effect on attracting talent into the marketplace, especially kind of like younger people. And I think what it kind of like, I mean, I think there was a comedy sketch that was about this kind of like, where the child's everyone in their family was a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, and they walked in saying, I want to go and run a restaurant, and the parents were absolutely kind of appalled. How do you
Yeah.
think we change that narrative? Because this is one of the sectors where you can be in your early 20s managing a team of 50 people running a multi-million pound business, which I think is like, a great thing. How do you think we change the narrative?
I think we've just got to be a bit braver about how great the industry is, how every day is something different. You're not stuck behind a desk. It's one of the few industries I believe that isn't going to be massively affected by AI. If I was a graduate at the moment and I was thinking, well, let's go into financial services or let's be a lawyer or let's go into consulting, I go, well, they're going to be tricky industries because they're going to be leaning into AI and they're going to be cutting people at the base level. Hospitality will always need people.
Hmm.
Hospitality will need service, and they'll need people in quality positions of management and back of house. And that is just a fun. We all need to eat, and we all love going out, and we all love hospitality experiences. It's a fairly recession proof. Obviously the high street gets massively affected in recession, but it is more recession proof than most, certainly in contract catering, and the ability to rise quite quickly up the ladder, as I said, with little formal education to get some decent, I think people are surprised. There are some good salaries out there. You'll know in your business, Christian, and if you're recruiting a good executive head chef or good venue manager, general manager now, these are big salaries,
Hmm.
good bonuses, good rewards. You can, to a certain degree now, have your own work-life balance and make sure that, whatever works for you, that yes, there are certain long hours, but I think there's an acceptance in our industry that if you need to take the Monday and Tuesday off, fine. There's no hard and fast rule that you need to be in the office every day doing a certain thing. And we've got to be more positive about that. In the same way that, in France or in Italy and Spain, being a hospitality professional is seen as a very high profile career. And we've just done ourselves down as an industry. We've been too quiet. We haven't blown our own trumpet enough. And I think we've got to get out there and attract core talent. But I think there are going to be people that are looking around at hospitality and other industries because of the effects that are going to happen in the more traditional industries where graduate recruitment is going to go down and recruitment, of non-graduates is going to go down in all levels. Administration, bureaucracy roles aren't going to be there in the same level. So we
Hmm.
can, bring those talents in. And what's important for us as a business is that we have very structured career pathways now. We have amazing apprenticeship schemes, we have amazing graduate schemes, and we have amazing schemes for culinary leaders to come in at the very bottom level. We have chef hands program that teaches people with no culinary skills to work in a kitchen. To the very top level, we have a graduates, an apprenticeship scheme, sorry, at the levels 5 and above that Marcus Waring, works with a cohort of 20 people every year to bring them through and develop their careers. And I don't think people know about that enough. I don't think
Yeah.
we can hide our light under a bushel. People don't, like in our industry, contract catering. Even my friends, when I try and describe it, I think people get hotels and they get restaurants and they get cafes. They don't necessarily understand what contract catering is and the opportunities that it can deliver. And that's on us to bang the drum a bit louder.
100%. So in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, for my final question, kind of like industry trends, consumer kind of like habits, technology, innovation, all of that side of things, what are you really excited about? What do you think we've got coming down the line?
So I think what is really exciting that every age group still wants to and craves live experiences. So whether that's going out to the horse racing or a concert or a football game, I don't think that's going away. I think the level of hospitality or GA experience is going to change and fluctuate. So we have to adapt and develop new offers that really gets there. I think technology can be overused in certain areas. So I think technology is great when it delivers a pint quicker into someone's hand, but it's not so great if it depersonalizes the hospitality experience. And I think we've learned that over the years now, that actually the high customer touch points are really necessary in hospitality. And we want to use technology to enable that, but not take away. So that's something that we're seeing. I think it's going to be interesting how diet changes. I think that there's obviously a rise of appetite suppressant drugs, and they're going to come in pill form this year. So I think we are going to see, maybe there's only 5% of the population taking those drugs at the moment because they're injecting. Pill format is going to be much more widely available. That might be 10% this time next year. It might not be, but if it is, that's 10% of your consumers that aren't going to be wanting to eat large meals. They're going to want small bite-size tastes effectively. And, evidence suggests that they drink a little bit less. And they also get turned off from ultra-processed food, which is a great thing. Personally, we have seen the diet of the nation and diet of the world become way too reliant on ultra-processed food. And I think what makes me positive, not the drugs necessarily. I don't necessarily think it's a great idea that everyone's taking drugs for the rest of their lives. In fact, I think it's a very bad idea. But it is turning people onto the conversation of what they're putting into their own bodies and the type of foods. And that I have seen a turn, not just from a sustainable point of view, but clean, lean meats. I think fermentation and the types of fermentation is becoming, gut health is becoming very important. I think people are leaning into beans and pulses, which are great for the planet as well. That's what excites me, that the range and the palette of our consumers is changing in a positive way, and we can get really creative around that, and that excites our chefs and our culinary teams. How we continue to deliver experiences that aren't just about the food on the plate as well is very important, because if you're coming 2 hours before the event for a hospitality experience and you're eating slightly less because of the reasons I just described, then it has to become much more about the overall experience. What's the lighting? What's the dressing in the space? The entertainment can't just be a few old professionals telling war stories. It's got to be much more engaging. That's part of our relationship with the Conduit Club. We want to lean into thought leadership and panels and discussions where people are craving more intelligent debate rather than just baseline level that's been provided at the moment. And all of those things, I just see good growth, good positivity, stay ahead of the game, keep innovating.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for jumping on, running over everything with us. Best of luck with all the expansion into Europe. I'm sure it's going to go phenomenally, phenomenally well. Can you tell us anything about which countries are coming next? Give us any insight.
Well, look, we're very focused on solidifying operations in the Netherlands and Germany. We've got good growth in both. We definitely are looking at other countries, but no firm commitments at the moment.
I'm not going to get an exclusive on this interview for that then. But anyway, thanks so much for hopping on. Cheers, Sean.
No worries. See you later.